So Nick, how long have you been a non-exec director?
I'm not exactly sure, actually, but it's over 25 years and probably a little less than 30.
Gosh.
I first got involved with a company that I'd invested in,
Yeah.
and needed a bit of help. So that I think was about 28 years ago. So
Wow.
Seems like quite a long time now.
Yes. And what about the sort of difference between being an executive director and a non-exec director? Is there a different sort of mindset needed?
Yes, I think there is actually, and it's a transition that everybody has to go through.
Yeah.
I think as an executive, you're always you need to be concerned with the detail. You need to be sure that the company's functioning the way it should do, and your role there primarily is to execute the strategy and to manage. As a non-executive director, you need to avoid the temptation to dive into that level of detail. And of course, there's detailed questioning that's required sometimes to really make sure that you've got to the bottom of an issue. But your role is not there to manage the business. It's there to support management. It's there to ensure a mixture of two things: conformance with regulation and performance of the business itself.
And it's interesting because the legal responsibilities are the same. I mean, you could say, why do it? I mean, they are onerous, aren't they?
Yeah, well, you certainly don't do it for the money. That's for sure. I think everybody has their own motivations, their own reasons. I mean, sometimes it's to give back, to contribute. For people who've had a successful career as an executive, they can then bring some of those skills to other companies. For me, the motivation really was to spend time with different types of companies to the ones that I've been executive in. So, yes, I mean, in my non-executive career, I am involved with a bank, which was where I was an executive. But I also do a whole variety of other companies as well. And for me, it's that variety, and the flexibility that I have through having a portfolio of assignments that really makes it attractive.
And sort of looking back over those years of being a board member, are there any particular changes that you've seen?
I think one of the big changes is around diversity. The conscious effort that now boards really make to avoid groupthink, to ensure they have different voices represented around the board table. That's a big transition. Now, some of that's been the function of problems that have happened in the past and therefore some regulation. There's clearly a lot more scrutiny in that area, particularly with listed companies at the moment. I think the other thing that I've noticed, and this is again a function of I think where we are in the cycle, is there are those two responsibilities for conformance, compliance with the way a company should operate, and performance, the returns that it generates for the shareholder. And certainly in regulated industry, there is a lot of focus on conformance at the moment, which I think, if you're not careful, can crowd out some of the discussions that boards really need to have around performance and delivering returns.
That's interesting, because I've heard this concern raised in a number of areas by directors. So, I mean, what is the answer to that? I mean, as you say, you can end up being drowned on the compliance risk management side of things.
Well, I think it's largely driven by common sense. If you have a board pack, for example, which is largely compliance and risk papers, and very little about business performance and strategy, you're going to get a very one-sided conversation at the board table. So I think there's a lot is around the way boards set up their agendas. A lot is around the way they prepare the papers to support those agendas. And I think the chair and the co-sec have a key role in sort of shaping the board discussion. Of course, again, going back to that thing about detail, if you're really going to dive into the detail of a compliance or risk question, then it will tend to, I think, crowd out some of the time you have for the other discussions. Sometimes you can take those things into a separate meeting. Have a board meeting that's dedicated to talking about those issues, in the same way that you might have times that are dedicated to talk about strategy. So if there is a meaty piece of work that needs to be done, let's not try and shoehorn it into what should be a broader agenda.
And there's very much a responsibility on compliance to ensure it's the substantive issues that are discussed at the board and not being sidetracked, presumably.
Totally right. And I said why I said the way that papers are presented. If papers are presented in the same way that they are for, let's say, an executive risk committee, the danger is that you're going to get a very similar discussion at the board that you would have at the executive risk committee, and that's really not appropriate. If you're able to pull out the key thematic issues and present those in a more holistic and strategic way, you will get a different type of discussion.
And what about your relationship with compliance? Does it differ, being an exec director compared with a non-exec director?
Well, I think both are looking to compliance for a level of assurance, and therefore it has to be based on trust. So I think from that point of view, it's very similar. The big difference is, as a non-executive director, you inevitably won't be spending so much time actually in the business as an executive director. So I think you do lean much more on the second line and the third line of defence to be giving you the information, the assurance that you need to ensure that things are working the way they're supposed to.
So to wrap up, if there was one practical piece of advice you would give to somebody who was perhaps considering becoming an NED, what would that be?
Get some experience. Now, I know it's a bit chicken and egg, but definitely having experience helps you to learn to really understand the role of the non-executive director and how to fulfill it. Training, of course, is important. You can there's some very good training courses that you can go on, which will help expose you to the skills and the requirements of an NED. But start, get some practical experience. And for me, I was lucky enough to have invested in a small company that needed my help. But not-for-profit's a great place to start. I think you can get some really invaluable experience there. Charities, not-for-profits are generally, crying out for skills which we kind of take for granted at companies. And I think you can make a real contribution there and learn at the same time. So that would be my tip.
Thank you, Nick. Really good talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.